على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the continuation of the book Kitab of Nurul Idah of Al-Imam Hassan Shukun Bulali. We pray that Allah bless this lesson and make it a reason where our sins are forgiven, our prayers are answered, inshaAllah ta'ala. Ameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen. We are still in the chapter of Tahara, where in the last lesson we spoke about removing any water from the well that is small, and the amount of the water in the well is a small quantity. So we understood that water in the small quantity becomes mutanajjis if a small amount of filth enters it, regardless whether it changes the properties of the water or it does not change the properties of the water. So from here the author speaks about small wells, and if in a situation where a filth that is not forgiven enters into the well, how do we purify the well? So he spoke about removing the water from the well, removing the water that is contaminated with the filth from the well. So we spoke about a few situations, and it depends on how big the filth that enters the well, in order for us to ascertain how much water has to be removed. طيب. So the last part we were speaking about this part where the author mentioned ma la yunajjisul bi'ra, the exceptions. There are certain things that when it falls into the well, they are forgiven. What are the things that are forgiven? So this is the last thing that we spoke about. So he gave the example of the feces of the livestock, like the feces of the goat, camel, cows. These are forgiven because usually these are the animals that surround the well, and because they wanted to drink from the water. So their feces is something that is difficult to be protected from. If it falls, then it is forgiven, but it is only forgiven to such an extent that it is not too much. And if you look at the well, and the well is covered with this feces, then it is not permissible for us to do tahara. So it is mutanajjis. But if it is a little, it is forgiven. This is where the author mentioned illa ayyastaksirahu nadir. Nadir is a person who looks. You look at the water, and you see there are a lot of these feces around. So here it is not forgiven. But if it is just a little, then it is forgiven. Aw an la yakhluwa dalwun an ba'ratin. Or every time we take a pail of water, there will be this feces on the water. So we say this is a lot. This is mutanajjis. Naam. So this is the last thing that we mentioned. So now when we go on to the next part, the author mentioned ma la yufsidul ma. What are the things that does not contaminate any water, forgiven in that sense. So these are some of the things that the author mentioned. Wala yufsidul ma'a bijuz'i hamamin aw usfurin. So we have these two kinds of birds. This is the pigeon. Parts of the pigeon that fell into the water. This is forgiven. This is forgiven. Wala bimauti ma la dama lahu fihi. And likewise, the carcass of animals that does not have blood. Does not have blood here, meaning the blood doesn't flow. Because all animals have blood. But there is a difference between, for example, a fly and a rat. A fly is an animal that the blood does not flow, but a rat is an animal that the blood flows. So animals whose blood and it does not flow. And we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, hadith of Zubab. إذا وقع الذباب في إناء أحدكم إذا وقع ذباب في شراب أحدكم أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, يعني if a fly and it enters into the drink of one of you, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he mentioned فَلْيَغْمِسْهُ, يعني you have to push it so that it becomes drowned. وَلْيَنْزَعْهُ, and remove the fly, meaning the water is still tahir, the water is still pure. So this is an example of an animal that the blood does not flow. The fly, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and so on. So if this kind of animals and it fell into the carcass, fell into the water in the well, that is a small amount. It does not make the water mutanajjis. And then he gave an example, kasamakin, just like fishes, and fishes are pure. Fishes and it carries a different ruling than the animals that we mentioned before, because we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ pertaining to the ocean, where the Prophet mentioned al-hillu maitatuhu, yani the carcass that of the animals that live in the sea is halal, yani it is pure and halal. So this is the example of fish. So fish, no problem. Any dead fish, is inside this well. There is no problem. What difda is frog. This is also forgiven. Yani if you have this dead frog inside, it is forgiven. Wa baq is bug bug. Wa dubab, wa zanbur, hornet. Wa akrab, this is the scorpion. So all these are some of the animals. La damalaha sa'il, that the blood does not flow in this animals. So all these things are forgiven. Wala biwuku'i adamin, likewise the author mentioned adami, a human being. A human being enters into the water, no problem, and it doesn't contaminate the water. وَمَا يُؤْكَلُ لَحْمُهُ إِذَا خَرَجَ حَيًّا, and likewise animals that can be eaten. It enters into the well and it goes out of the well in the state of alive, no problem. It doesn't contaminate the water. Likewise, any human being enters into the well and goes out, it doesn't contaminate the water. Likewise, animals that we can eat. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ عَلَى بَدَنِهِ نَجَاسًا, but the condition is that when it enters into the well, none of the parts of the body are mixed with filth. وَلَا بِوُقُوعِ بَغْلٍ, and likewise baghl, as what I mentioned last time, it is an animal that is born. One of the parents is a horse and the other is a donkey. So baghl is an animal, horse and donkey. I do not know the English word and I forgot. But this is the animal is called a baghl. Wala bi wuku'i baghl. A baghl enters it. It doesn't contaminate the water. Wahimar, donkey, wasiba' tayr. This what you call it, the birds and the predator birds, like eagle and so on. Wa wahshin fi sahih. And likewise, what you call it, the wild animals when it enters, based on the opinion that is accepted in the madhab. وَإِنْ وَصَلَ لُعَابُ الْوَاقِعِ إِلَى الْمَاءِ أَخَذَ حُكْمَهُ. Then the author mentioned وَإِنْ وَصَلَ لُعَابُ الْوَاقِعِ إِلَى الْمَاءِ. So when an animal enters into the water, so we look at the saliva of this animal. If the saliva touches the water, then we have to go back to the ruling. If this is an animal whose saliva is najis, then the water becomes mutanajis. But if this animal and the saliva is not najis, then the water is not mutanajis. So this is what the author meant. وَإِنْ وَصَلَ لُعَابُ الْوَاقِعِ لُعَابُ الْوَاقِعِ إِلَى الْمَاءِ, the saliva of these animals enters into the water, أَخَذَ حُكْمَهُ. Then it depends on what kind of animals they are. So if it is animals that cannot be eaten, and the saliva enters, then it becomes mutanajis. If the animals are animals that we can eat, that's what we mentioned, the saliva is not najis. Aywa. Then the author mentioned tanjisul hayawanil mayyiti lil bi'ri. Tanjisul hayawanil mayyit lil bi'ri. Number one, this is a part anywhere you have a dead any animal in the water. You have a dead any animal in the water. Number one, wujudu hayawan mayyit fil bi'ri yunajjisuha min yawmin wa laylatin. So now the author speaks about the time frame. If an animal died and it enters into the water, if it is less than 24 hours, we can remove the animal and we can we can still use the water. If it is less than 24 hours. So this is understood because animals that are present, the dead animals that are present at a long time, and it will contaminate the water. So as long as it is less than 24 hours, we can still use the water. So how do we ascertain whether this is a dead animal that is newly entered? We look at the signs. We look at the signs. If we see the animal is still intact, there is none of the feathers or fur detached from the body, and there's not much smell, for example, then we know that this animal has just fallen. But the second situation, he say wa muntafikh, if the body is dispersed, because animals after some time in water, the body will be detached and it becomes bloated. Min salasati ayamin wa layaliha in lam yu'lam waqtu wuqu'ihi. So if the animal that is bloated, then it is within 3 days. It is within 3 days if we do not know when is the occurrence of this. What is the meaning here? Meaning now the example is like this. Now you take water from a well for ablution. After you took that ablution, then somebody told you that actually in this water there is a dead animal. There is a dead animal. So if it is less than 24 hours, we say your wudu is valid. But it is more than 24 hours, then you have to make up for your prayer, because your wudu is not valid. Then when comes to an animal that has been bloated, for example, in the water, and you have been taking ablution from that same water, then you have to make up. You have to make up not only on that day but 3 days before, because this animal has been there for some time, because otherwise it cannot be bloated. It has been there for some time, at least 3 days. So this is why the author is saying min salasati ayamin wa layaliha in lam yu'lam waqtu wuqu'ihi. If we do not know when exactly this animal is there, unless if we know, for example, we know 2 days ago that the animal is there, so you have to make up for 2 days, because your wudu becomes invalid. But if you do not know, then we take precaution of 3 days. The 3 days before, where the wudu that you have been taking from this well, now you have to pay back those prayers. Now, so there is a difference between an animal that that just fell into the water and fell for some time. And how do we know? By the bloating. And if the animals, that's what I mentioned, disperse, and there is bloating and so forth, it shows this animal is there for quite some time. But if it is a new animal that fell into, then the precaution is only for 24 hours. Wallahu a'lam bis-sawab. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Next, inshallah, we speak about al-istinja.